Joanna Lin is a master at getting others on board, doing the tough, behind-the-scenes people alignment that makes great marketing happen. It's a skill she's honed while successfully building teams and leading marketing efforts at brands including Yahoo, Time Inc., Integral Ad Science, and Mediaocean, where she and I worked side by side, and now at her own firm, Primary Marketing Collective. I brought her in to discuss her secrets to people alignment for better marketing. It's an area she knows quite a lot about, and I think you'll enjoy. I'm Abe Mesrich. This is Amazing Marketers, and without further ado, let's dive in. Hey, hello, Joanna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. The premise, as you know, is just amazing marketers talk about stuff that they're amazing at. So I want to get to the things you're amazing at professionally, but first I want to get to, I believe you're going to talk about how incredible of a parallel parker you are.
Yeah, I mean, I told you this last time as kind of a joke,
and now it's a new, it's in the show. You've transformed the show.
Yeah. Now it's in the show. Yeah, it's funny because you were like, "Oh, tell me about amazing skill," and I was like, "Well, like hopefully it's about professional, not about personal." But the parallel parking thing is kind of something that I've been good at for a really long time. I don't really drive anymore, so you can't really test me right now, but I probably get back into it. But I, in college, I used to drive to an internship every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have to move my car like every so often. There's only street parking. And I got so good at parallel parking. I mean, I could have done it with my eyes closed. Like people would stop on the street and be impressed by it.
Wow.
That's how good I was. Like it's literally a turn and I'd be in the spot and I just walk out and no adjustments, no anything. And it happened so fast that most people didn't even realize that that I even set myself up to parallel park. But again, I've not done this in a long time.
Well, so I'm hearing if marketing doesn't work out, you could be the getaway driver, right? That's like another.
Yeah, I could be the getaway driver.
It's an alternate.
I do actually enjoy driving, but
that's cool.
Not going to become a truck driver anytime soon. I'm good with the sitting at home.
All right, you can. We'll figure this out. Excellent. So that's your non-professional skill, one of many.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears to marketing. So tell me about one thing you feel like you're really, really strong at, and what it is, how you define it, and why it matters to brands.
You defined it as herding cats, but really I find myself thinking about how I'm really good at consensus and getting agreement from people, buy-in, if you will.
Right.
And it's just something that I think throughout my career has been that one thing that a lot of people trust me to do and get me to do, especially when there are other people who have tried and haven't been able to do it. I always ended up being the this was my special project. Oh, they couldn't do it. Why don't you go in and help them out and try to win everyone over and get everyone in agreement so we can move on.
Which is not.
So
I'm going to be really blunt. Having failed at this quite often, it's hard. It
is, but it just takes practice and it takes a lot of time and effort. That's the big thing about it.
So give me
a lot of people don't want to. Yeah.
Well, so give me a scenario. Who are are you talking about? Give me. It could be something that it could be something made up. It could be something that you're or an amalgam or something that a moment you're proud of. What does this look like in practice?
So, I think the most relatable thing I can talk about is project management.
Okay.
And how do you get a project end to end
Mm-hmm.
without way too many disagreements?
Right.
And how do you get it across the finish line as fast as possible?
Mm-hmm.
And most people manage projects relatively well, but there are always bumps in the road. But I find that when I manage projects, they tend to go smoothly because not only am I great at consensus and getting people on the same page and the buy-in and so on, but I'm also very good at planning out scenarios in my head so I can have contingency plans in place. So because of that, I'm always able to go and talk to different people through these scenarios so that I have like a either an answer from them ahead of time, or I know which direction they're planning on going in during a project in order to either rein them in or, you know, continue to like work on them to convince them, or use them as an ally if I need them in something. So, for example, in my career, I've done a lot of rebrands. And in these rebrands, it's really hard to get people to agree on almost anything that comes to rebrand. Correct. What it looks like, what you want to say, when you want it to launch, what materials need to happen. So many things going on.
Right.
And I think, you know, I think part of it is instinct. And when I look at a rebrand project, I'm like, okay, let's look at the people first, because, you know, you can do a rebrand project by yourself and it would be totally fine. Right. But once you add people in, that it's chaos.
It makes it complicated.
Those are my cats. Right. So knowing who the people are and the players and what motivates them, where their decision-making power is, and so on, is just like so critical baseline of any project. And I think a lot of people don't actually like take that time to really understand everyone that's involved and make sure they know everyone that's involved. Because also some people are like, oh, rebrand, that's just the marketing team. No, rebrand is that everyone in the company basically. Right. But then some people have less power, some people have more power. Who are those people? What motivates them? So, you know, you could have a CEO who's truly visionary, blah, 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 but maybe it's their ego that drives them. So then you have to put that into consideration. Maybe you have a CRO who could give zero, you know, they don't care. Right. And you're like, okay, how do you get them to care? Because you need their opinion. So just understanding that's like the biggest baseline of a project that, or something like that, where I'm working on getting consensus. So once you understand the people, the next layer is, okay, of the project, how do you make sure all the pieces play together? So for me, it's a little bit like, it's gonna sound silly, but it's like Legos or like chess or like a game. I'm looking at, okay, if I need to build the foundation of this, here's what I need to do to build the foundation. Like, here are all the pieces, and then here are all the people that need to be involved. And then taking the time to shop that around person to person, understanding like, well, what's like their hard no's, what are their okays and what are their yeses, and then just trying to find where that overlap is in the Venn diagram. And then, you know, in some cases, like someone might have a hard no, but you're never going to like say, like, you know, you're never going to give them a concession for it because it just doesn't make sense. And then it's like, then it becomes a negotiation situation. So I think this is all to say, like, it's all a game of strategy when it comes to consensus. Yeah, like you really have to think through it all. It isn't just like, here's the task, do the task. Right. Who does the task involve, and how do you get it across the finish line, like in the fastest way possible? Yeah, there are little things like, yeah, you want to produce like a banner for your social media, you know, profile for like then all of the staff. That might be easy. Just send it to designer, it comes back and no one's going to complain about it. Right. But then it's like, okay, the little blurb on the social media profile, salespeople might be like, that doesn't make sense. You know, you have your CEO who's like, I don't want it to say that. You got to make sure your messaging is right. So you have to think through all those scenarios. And then you have to think through, okay, whose opinion doesn't matter at the end of the day? Right. Maybe salesperson, because they're the most junior in the group. So how do you then get the salesperson's opinion to not be as loud and annoying? Then you have to go directly to the CRO, be like, hey, do you agree with this? If you agree with this, you got to tell your team that this is it. Like, there's nowhere else for them to go. And they can voice their opinion into the wind if they would like, but we've made this decision as a business. So I don't know. That's how I'm thinking about things. That's so interesting. So, okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. So yeah. So, sorry, I love this is great. Talk about this. So this is which is why you're here. So a couple things. So one thing that just sort of struck me that sort of surprised me is when you said I'm fielding objections. In my head, I had the scenario which we've all been in is, you know, marketing comes to sales or CFO or whomever with this great idea.
and they just
Torpedo
torpedo it. They're like, that's ridiculous, that's terrible, and then you have to convince them. But what's interesting, you also bring in the opposite situation, which is you go to the CRO or the head of sales, and they're like, okay, whatever. And you have to, and it's really important. Like when you said it, it's really important for them to get the buy-in, because their team is going to be the one who's evangelizing this branding, let's say, and they really, really have to be excited. And so I think it's really interesting, just sort of the getting people on board, even though it's not just getting people on board who disagree with you, it's also getting people on the board who just have no opinion.
I think the having no opinion one is the hardest one, because this is about the business, right? And if they're an important role, they should have an opinion.
Right.
But a lot of times people just don't even know what to say, especially when it comes to marketing. If it's a creative question and they're not a creative person, they don't know. If it's they might think they don't know anything about marketing because they're not a marketer. So I think part of it is also thinking through, how do you make them care? And how do you make it matter to them? So I'll give us another example.
Yeah.
Let's get outside of rebrand. I am working on doing vertical packaging for a client right now.
Okay.
And it sounds great, right? You're a salesperson. Your vertical is travel. You want to sell a travel solution. Like, you would think it would be easy to like put that in front of them. But I'm working with a sales team who likes to create custom everything. We all know those sales teams. They're like,
yes,
no, like, our client is so special, we got to give them this custom solution, blah, blah, blah. Or they might be like, well, how is selling it this way so different from selling it the way that we're selling it right now? Which they're kind of just throwing the kitchen sink at them, being like, look at all of these things that we do, feature, capability. And you're just like, well, you're not really selling the business. You're just selling a bunch of things.
Right.
So right now I'm like working on, okay, how am I going to convince them to use this material that we are building? And I think part of it is, okay, what's this team good at? What's this team not good at? What will they give on? What won't they give on? And some of it is, there are people in the business that are doing well by like kind of being more strategic, like going industry, like we're deciding to do with this travel package. And so it was first approaching them. Okay, why would you do this? Why do you think it works? Really understanding it. So this is the relationship part, like going to that salesperson and be like, okay, how does this work? So on. Okay, taking that information, being like, let's use them as a use case to share it with the rest of the business, to say, hey, we've had, this person have success selling it this way. Like, everyone else is selling, the old way or your custom way or whatever, and we're seeing close rates dropping. So how would it hurt you to just try something new? Try it on one or two clients, try it on, someone new, see if it works. So I'm like, those are the scenarios I'm working out. And so everything becomes kind of a negotiation at the end of the day, which is also another skill I highly recommend everyone like read into, learn, practice, is negotiation, because most people aren't good at it. It's not a natural skill.
No.
Some people, sure, like it comes naturally, but for most, no. And I actually highly recommend this one book, which now, Bargaining for Advantage.
Okay.
It's amazing book. It's for everyday negotiation, not just business negotiation.
Sorry, bargaining for advantage?
Bargaining for Advantage.
Bargaining for Advantage.
By Richard Schnell, I believe.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that name, but we can post it in like a comment.
Yeah, we'll post it in the show notes.
Yeah. I only say, like, even if you're trying to negotiate with your partner on something, this is very useful. So I highly recommend that everyone read this, because it's like one of those skills where it's like, if you're trying to convince people, you're negotiating with them to get them on your side. You're trying to build empathy, rapport, get them on the same page, and then move them to make a decision that is the decision you want them to make.
Right.
It's all negotiation.
Right. Yes. Yes. So
I guess big picture, consensus building, underneath it, all these skills, negotiation, relationship building, communication, if you were to like build a triangle or a pyramid of all the skills that you need. That lead up to getting consensus. So
one other thing I want to go back to is you talked about scenario planning, which I think is really really interesting. So do you just have like a choose your own adventure book in your head? Do you actually sit down with colleagues and say like, and role play and have them, be the bad guy? Like how detailed, how do you scenario plan for these different possible outcomes?
So I have to say, for me, it's probably just instinct and it comes naturally for me.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's more like, you need me to do X. This say this like travel package we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think about it for a little bit, and then I can come up with a million questions like, who's involved, who's been selling travel, blah, blah, blah. I ask all the questions because, again, a huge part of this is gathering as much information as possible, because I can't make decisions and understand what exactly is going on without information. So I start there, and then I can kind of determine, well, obviously there are a couple ways this could go. One is we could produce this and no one adopts it.
Right.
We can produce this and people like try it for a little bit, but it doesn't stick.
Right.
We could try to get, the C-levels buy-in and they enforce it, and then people just really hate it.
Right.
Right. And it just falls apart.
Right.
Or obviously the best scenario is people start trying it and the win rates go up in travel and we're looking really good.
Right.
So I think through all those things, and then I go through, okay, obviously we want everyone to adopt in whatever, like, use it. And then I go through okay, how do we get there? And then map out all the things that I probably need to do to get there. And then I go back and look at the worst case scenarios. Okay, if we don't get these things, like, what are the critical things? Where will it fall apart? Oh, like, yeah, sure, we need the C-level to buy in on it. If they're going to enforce it, right, and the sales team isn't into it and they start hating it, what do I do to prevent that from happening? I have to go start like selling it. Basically, I have to sell it to the sales team and convince them.
That's fascinating. So
what happens if
No, this is great. This is just, you have it's a war plan or a playbook. It's you're really going through all this. I think it's great. You're going through all the scenarios and you're really trying to figure out where could things break and how do I address those things.
Exactly. Where could things break? That's exactly. And I think a lot of it, it's embarrassing because I'm a little bit of a prepper, like in real life, right? Like, I am about to go on a trip and I already have my complete travel list. I have all the scenarios. I literally just put waterproof Band-Aids on my list because we are going paddleboarding. And I'm like, if we get a cut, we need waterproof Band-Aids.
But if somebody gets a cut in the boat, they're going to be turning to Joanna and they're like going to pull it out. And you're like, you all laughed at me. Band-Aid. Here's your Band-Aid.
Right. So I don't know. It's just how my brain works. But I will say it probably at some point in my life became critical, and which is why it became like more and more natural to me.
Yep.
So I don't think I was this way when I was like 5, or like a teenager. But at some point I was like, oh, this really works for me. So I have to continue to think like that. You know what it is? Maybe because I went on a trip and I got caught without something I needed, and now I'm like, must have it.
Right.
So I must think through every scenario.
Right. It's this reminds me. I can't remember the book. I because I didn't read it, but I read a review of it. It's the winningest basketball coach in the history of the NBA. I forget his name, and he wrote a book called "The Power of Negative Thinking," and the thesis of the book is that to win in basketball, you don't have to be good at anything. You just have to figure out every single possible thing that could go wrong and then plan against that. And it just sounds like, and he's a very successful individual. And it just sounds like, that's his whole, he sounds like he's not a happy person. He's like had many heart attacks and he can't sleep at night. But he's really good at basketball, so that's all that matters.
This does come with a lot of anxiety.
It's
you know what it is? Now that we're talking about like why I'm this way, when I was in high school, I was in charge of building our senior year parade float. We did these parade floats for homecoming, and
this is very elaborate.
We I know, it's so random. My friend and I sat down, we sketched it out, we drew it out, we went and bought the materials. We got everyone together. We built everything. And then on the day of the thing, it rained. And we had used watercolor paint. So the paint started coming off.
But it was great. It was tie-dye.
And then instead of like wood, we had used cardboard in some places. So it started to melt.
Oh, no. Wait, tell me there weren't people on it, right? It was just like a...
There were no people on it. But there is a photo of me somewhere out in the ether of me crying, holding this float together. And that's my trauma of needing to like be well planned for everything.
So now that you brought this up for the episode, your photo for the episode will be... we have to
I gotta find it. I don't know.
You bawling, teenage Joanna bawling in front of a melted float.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. It's a good reason.
I forgot about
that. But ever since then, this is your superhero origin story.
Yeah.
And now you fight crime.
I should talk to my friend about that because I have my friend who designed it with me is now a project manager.
Oh,
I should see if that trauma has impacted her. That's
wow. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that moment of honesty.
Yeah, I don't know if any of this is actually helpful.
No.
I will say, if you want something to go successful, you have to think a lot about it. You have to
think through
and think quickly about it.
So one question, just bring you back to. So I thought that was really interesting. You go to the salesperson, you go to the sales team, and say, "Let's try this out and see if it works." And then you get buy-in. But I can see a lot of scenarios where you can't get that kind of data, where you can't put your toe in the water. You have to sort of, like a rebrand, right? Like changing the sales pitch or you can sort of do iterations, but there are definitely scenarios where you have to do it's all or nothing, right? Like tomorrow morning, all the logos are changing, all the colors are changing, all the fonts, everything's changing, and you can't have let's have one brand for half the sales team, one brand for the, it's not going to work.
Right.
So how do you create that proof when how do you create that proof when you can't say, well, see, Sheila's done it and it worked for her team. Now you try it.
Actually, what's kind of funny about that is we just did a rebrand and we weren't able to launch everything at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So some old branding still had to go out the way that it was going out.
Okay.
And I think the reality was also setting expectations with the senior leaders that this might still happen. Because we hadn't invested enough in making sure it was 100% perfect and we didn't have the time to do it. And also this is a company that's been around since 2008. So this is a lot of materials we had to rebrand and some of the stuff they're still using. We were just we had to make a decision as a group and then bring it to senior leadership to be this is going to happen. You have to be okay with this. And if you're not okay with this, then you have to be okay with us moving the launch date until a later time.
Right.
And they were nope, let's get it out. We've been waiting for it. It's okay if some stuff goes out in branding. We'll make sure that it's explained to our clients or whoever that, we're rolling things out because it's a long process. And, stuff like that happens all the time. I think in terms of a refusal, no, hard no, we're not going to do it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's some ways, obviously, that's just the time and effort in convincing someone that this is how it's going. It's kind of there's old adages that you could say, get in the pool or get out. Everyone else is at the pool party. If you're not joining the pool party, you can leave.
Right.
That kind of thing. And then, of course, you don't want to go the route of going okay, I'm going to tell mom and dad, the parents of the company, the senior leadership. But sometimes you have to. And it's kind of this is the direction everyone's going in. You don't necessarily agree with it, but it's not a personal opinion. And you have to remove yourself from that. But that's just a conversation. And I think a lot of times people get into companies and they don't spend as much time as they should on building relationships with everyone. Because everyone of course there are people who don't matter as much, but most people do in some way, shape, or form. So I think building relationships is super important, where at least you have put in that effort. I think that's number one. And then number two, which I talk about a lot because I've also been in failed roles where I've been head of marketing and it hasn't worked out, and it hasn't worked out because I've come in and I've been a little bit more self-righteous about like, this is the way we should do it, blah,
Mm,
blah, blah. And then it becomes this like respect thing.
mm,
The leadership that I'm working with, they either don't respect what I'm saying and then I start disrespecting them, or I don't respect them because I think that they're wrong and they feel it and then they start disrespecting me. And then it's just a crumbling
right.
structure of like, if we can't lead with respecting one another about the decisions that we're making, then it's not going to work. So I think that also when there is a dissenter in the situation, it's about respecting their opinion and understanding them, not dismissing them
Mm,
outright.
right. 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 I wonder if that happened. It's you always hear about the classic, CMO tenure is super short, and I wonder if part of that is marketers have an expertise that isn't immediately shared or even understood across the
Yes.
organization. So the marketer comes
Yes.
in and says, "This is how you should do this," and it's obvious to them why. And then the rest of the team are like, "That's stupid. Why are you throwing all this money at this thing? It doesn't make any
Yes.
sense to us." And to your point, like that, rather than consensus building, it becomes, "Well, I'm the expert," and then they're like, "Well, we don't understand why you need to be an expert. You're just making pictures." And then
Yeah.
next CMO because 18 months are over. And
Yeah. I mean, classic, right? Classic, classic, classic situation. And I'll say there are a number of things. I will say on one end, you have this happening, this scenario that you're happening, and it's true, like the marketer could be 100% right and the rest of leadership or most of leadership doesn't agree and it becomes
right,
contentious. And you also have, I'm just going to throw it out there are really bad marketers out there.
true.
I'm just going to say that. And they're selling themselves as marketers because a lot of people believe that they can do marketing because they've been marketed at. And so
Right.
a lot of people get in these roles because they can talk the talk or because they've been a consumer, talk about the situation, but they don't actually know how to do the work.
Mm,
And so you get into this like inflated, because also like a lot of times leadership teams who haven't been marketers before or haven't had a lot of experience with marketing don't actually know marketing. So they're at the same place as this person who's pretending that they're doing marketing, and they might hire someone and it just breaks down.
right.
So you have both sides of the coin. But for the side where it's like you're butting heads and it's contentious because like the marketer thinks that they're right, you know, I think it's just like because the role wasn't respected to begin with,
Mm,
and then it just becomes a slippery slope. I think a lot of
right.
times, marketing is seen as a service and not as a strategic partner,
Right.
especially in B2B. B2C, I think,
Yes.
is a totally different
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Yeah. Where B2C is the most
But
important role in the
B2B,
company is the CMO.
yes, yeah. But in B2B, it's just not seen as a strategic partner, especially in a sales led organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic because if you are trying to scale your business faster than just hiring people to sell,
Mm-hmm.
you need marketing and you need it to be done well. And it's not magic, it takes time. And that's the hard part is how do you tell someone who's urgently trying to scale and grow their business that marketing isn't a set and done, I'm going to run an ad campaign and get thousands of leads. This is just not how it works.
Right.
How do you do that? And it's about the time and effort, like working with that person and getting them to understand and showing them what's working and showing them the progress constantly. And that's exhausting. So most marketers don't like doing that.
Right.
And I think the thing that like I have come to terms with is you always have to put in the time. Even if like someone is like, "Oh, I understand marketing. I've worked with marketers. I've seen it work." You still have to put in time because the philosophy of whoever they worked with before, their philosophy might be different from
Mm-hmm.
yours, and you still have to spend time with them being like, "Are we on the same page? Like, do you understand what I'm trying to do? Are we in agreement?" Like
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Yeah. 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 It's I'm just thinking of like one small example from my career that I had back to back bosses. One boss said, the most important thing, the only thing that matters for your content machine is getting email signups. That's it. All we just it's just a funnel to get as many email signups as possible. That was boss A.
Mm-hmm.
Next role, boss B. Email signups are completely overinflated metric. It doesn't matter. It doesn't it's just about branding. And I'm not weighing on who's right or who's wrong, but just the fact that you could have these are both very, very talented marketers, diametrically different opinions about a key metric. It's just so when you come in and you say,
Yeah.
I know about marketing, whose marketing do you know?
Right. And I mean, that's the time where, okay, this is going to happen. And you could say, okay, and do exactly what they say, even if you disagree with them.
Yeah.
Or this is also a time to be like, hey, tell me more about your thinking. Like, give me some things so you can actually have a conversation with them to be like, well, here's what I'm thinking about it. And would you consider this? And this is, again, where negotiation is super important. And also, there's another book I'm going to talk about, which is nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication is also super important because a lot of times people will be like, they'll hear something they don't like from another person and kind of just be like, you're wrong, or you should do this, or blah, blah, blah. And that's violent communication. You're literally pushing that person in a corner, and the only thing they can do is be defensive. So learning to come to the table, be like, well, I'm feeling this, or like, I'm seeing it this way, where someone can be like, oh, okay, and have an open mind about it rather than feeling like they need to defend themselves is all part of the magic of getting consensus.
Right. It's making somebody your partner, not making them back down.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So by the way, we're doing a rebrand in the middle of this episode. It is not hurting cats. It's taking people with you. I think that's what you're doing.
Okay, I like it.
So give me a scenario. Give me a time when you won somebody over and you're like, holy crow, I was not expecting that to go well at all, and you just turned it around. You're like, the rest of the day you're patting yourself on the back.
Oh my gosh, you're like putting me
your best
like,
or yeah.
I really have to think about it the last time I did that, because I'm also like, I'm not in a traditional role anymore where like every day I'm working with a group of people. I'm a consultant, and so like, but there's one person at one of my clients who is notoriously difficult to work with.
Okay.
Like, just like says no to everything, always has an opinion. You send something out, they have something to say about it, and it's always, frankly, irritating. It's super annoying.
Yep.
And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're just, again, really annoying. And even when they're right, they're really annoying because they just do this all the time. But, recently we started working on our sales pitch, and, she wanted to be super involved. Totally fine. Like, you have to have this person involved because they're pretty senior. Having conversations with them, they're giving feedback. Some of it's good. Some of it's like, oh God, please, I'm not going to even consider that, but sure. And at the end of the day, when we were like finishing up the project and I'm like sharing out, I'm like, listen, like, I heard everything that you had to say. And I think that these things were really, really good and really important. So I'm definitely incorporating these. These things did not feel as important for the rest of the organization, but we'll keep them in mind for future iterations. But let's go out with this version. And she was like, okay, great. And normally she's the kind of person who'd be like, no, everything I say has to be included. I was like, oh, okay. So I've discovered about this person is they like to just feel like they've been heard and validated and almost put on a pedestal. Like, oh my gosh, your ideas are wonderful.
Right.
And when you say those things, that unlocks something in them to be like, yeah, okay, great.
But I feel like that's true for everybody. I mean, everybody wants to, or maybe this person more than most.
This person wants to be extra validated, extra put on a pedestal.
Got it.
Most people are fine with oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's cool, good. She needed like an extra, like, oh my gosh, like, you're so smart.
Got it. But it sounds like there's sort of like there's the validation meter, and you can turn it up and turn it down, and everybody needs the validation. Everybody needs to be brought in. It's just some people, it's like, thanks for having the meeting, and some people are like, oh my God, you're the world's greatest genius. Obviously, we're going to put everything in. We're going to put these in now, and these 5 years from now.
Right. I mean, I figured out basically how to stop her in her tracks so that she would like be like, this is acceptable. And I also, sometimes you have to do like the red light, green light thing. Okay, here's this project that we're delivering. You don't agree with 100% of it, but how much of it is actually a red light? Like, what is bad? And when it's like this small, you can be like, that is a drop in the bucket to the rest of this project getting out, right? So is it okay that we push this out and solve for that little piece that doesn't make sense, down the road, just so we can get out the door? And a lot of people will agree to that.
That's interesting.
It's about kind of putting that perspective in.
It's about taking slices of, they come out and say, I disagree with all of this. And then you're just trying to do these sort of operations to figure out.
It's not all of it. It's never all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do we agree on, or what can we go for it? You're in the middle of a.
No. I'm saying it's never all of it. And what can we agree on? I mean, that's a big question, right? Like, where can we find common ground so that we can move forward? And I think no one wants to be stuck in the fighting place, maybe unless they're a lawyer, but no one wants to be stuck fighting over something. So I think, like, figuring that out and working it out and taking the time to do it. Again, this all boils down to time. A lot of people don't have the patience for it. They just will be like, whatever, dismiss it and walk away, and the project gets stuck.
So interesting. Are there ever times when somebody will push back at you and you'll be like, wow, I had not thought of it that way, and you do a complete 180? You go with the plan of we have to get this thing done, and your agenda is I have to convince Jill from accounting to be on board with me, and Jill from accounting says, well, actually, I think this is not the right thing to do, and here's why. And you listen to Jill and you're like, oh my gosh, Jill is entirely right. What do you do? Like, are there times that you just scrap what you're trying to do, or how do you salvage that situation?
I think that's an evaluation for every situation, right? And I think the key always to everything is to have an open mind and be a little bit flexible. Because here's the thing is, you're never going to go from A to B and it's a straight line. It's never going to be a straight line. And I have a actual Mediaocean example.
Oh, amazing.
From
our old company.
It was after you had left Mediaocean and I was still there, and we were launching a new product. And this is where, you learn throughout your career, right? You make a lot of mistakes. And this is probably one of the biggest mistakes I made in my career is we're launching this product. And I just, even though I didn't feel quite right about the product launching, because I didn't really get it. I didn't really know if there would be adoption, but it's my first time launching a product, not a brand, a product. I went with it because I assumed everyone else had the right answers. And I didn't really check in or reevaluate. And I remember at the 11th hour, someone came in and was like, I don't know if that whatever it was is going to work. And I was like, well, we're at the 11th hour, we're doing it. And we did it, and it flopped. The whole product completely flopped.
Oy.
I don't think it exists today. And it's just one of those things where now when I think about that, I'm like, if someone had said that to me, I should have immediately gone to someone more senior with more decision-making power to have that discussion and be like, hey, I'm feeling this. What do you think? Let's get some more information. Who should we talk to? Should we pump the brakes on this and go back to the drawing table for a little bit to fix it so we get it right? Because the situation isn't we can't do it. No, it's no, we want to get it right. So how are we going to get it right? We need to assess the situation. And so those are the things that you have to consider. So not only is it being flexible, but also when you're positioning it to someone where you have to change something or whatever, you have to position it properly. So thinking through that strategy for, okay, how are you going to convince people that we need to change direction and not head into a train wreck?
Right. So when you call up your manager and they call up their manager at, the 15th hour and they're like, so you have to make the case, this is why we should put the brakes on this for now.
Yeah, and you have to convince it in a way where it's it's not just we're stopping and it's not going forward. It's no, our goal is to get this done right. Would you rather negotiation, right? Would you rather go into the train wreck or pause, make sure we can change direction so it doesn't head into a train wreck? And I think most people are going to say, obviously, you don't want
the train wreck, right?
Right.
What do you do? And this is something I actually deal with now that I'm in consulting as well, is so all this makes a lot of sense, when the consensus you're trying to build is you're in Mediaocean. You're a full-time employee of the company. If there's an issue, if you need an issue, you walk down the hall, you talk to your friend, you meet your friend at the water cooler. Everybody's right there. If you're sort of parachuted in as a consultant, how does that change this whole process?
I know. These days, honestly, I have like an entire side network in Slack of like people that I throw ideas to. So, oh my gosh, this company that I work with, they are still email heavy, although they use Slack quite a bit. But Slack is more for like chatter and email is more for work. But I've discovered like what works for everyone so that I can throw them a question and I know that they'll answer immediately or like pretty immediately. And if they don't answer immediately, I know what other channels to get them in. So if it's like urgent, obviously, like I know how to get people's attention. But if it's not, and I just need to throw ideas around, honestly, I just craft something and send it out. Be like, I'm thinking about this. Do you think that this is gonna work? Just quick, quick question, whatever, and send it off. And it tends to work well. The other thing that's working really well in Slack is, do you have a minute to huddle? I don't know if you use Slack at all, but like huddle is like the best. Like, yeah, I'm like 5 minutes. Okay, here's my thought. Okay, cool, great. Move on. That's how I've been doing it. The other one is like, sometimes I use video. There's a video recording function. I used to use Loom, but like now that it's in Slack, I don't need it. Like I'll record myself being like, I'm thinking about this. Here's what it looks like on the screen. Can you please give me your feedback? Send it out. And it works pretty well too. And audio notes works really well too.
Right.
Just try every avenue to get feedback when you really need it.
That's interesting. So right. So it doesn't. It's not just every avenue of the message you're going to say. It's also every avenue of how do I get the person to pick up the proverbial phone? Which number do you call and
right.
Interesting.
I mean, I know some people who terrible. I know some people, they might be sitting at their computer. They look like they're sitting at the computer, but they're not. But then I'll check WhatsApp and it says how long ago they were on.
Amazing.
And I'll be like, okay, so I know that they were on their phone. So I can WhatsApp them.
That's sneaky.
And then sometimes I'll also go into Instagram and Instagram tells you when they were last online or they're online. And I'll be like, hey, check your Slack. Like, wow. I think the thing with me is I'm kind of relentless, which is probably also why I'm good at consensus building. Right. Is like, I will get the answers that I need.
You're just wearing everybody down, Joanna. That's really the...
Yeah, basically. Sorry.
That's amazing. That's tenacity. So who else is good at it? Who have you seen do it really well? You don't have to name it. It doesn't have to be names. It could just be like, a role.
Yeah. I think, most senior leaders have to be good at it in some way, shape, or form, especially senior leaders like in central roles, like a CXO for ops, strategy, of course, product leaders, marketing leaders, we talked about it a little bit. It's a hit or miss. And CEOs, of course, trying to get consensus. And when they aren't good at it, it usually falls apart pretty quickly. So people who move up are the ones, obviously. And I think the junior people who want to move up should be observing how the senior leaders are, what they're doing and how they're doing it, and ask questions. That's the only way to learn. Because, you're not going to learn if you don't, try to interact at every level and across departments. Right.
Do you have any tips for juniors who want to... So the difference, when we were junior, we were all in an office. Now everybody's remote, and it's all that consensus building is happening. It's on Slack, it's on Loom, you mentioned a whole bunch of different outlets. They're only visible from your desk and your device. So what's your... Do you have advice for juniors who are trying to figure out how to get this done and trying to watch it when there's nothing to watch?
Yeah, it's really tough because I don't know if I necessarily have a good answer because I have only been remote as a consultant. Really, I did work for a company once remote. So it's questionable. So maybe the question is like, as an outside consultant, entering a company where you don't know anyone and you're trying to build relationships and so on, how would I do it? Right? Especially because there's, as you said, nothing to observe. I think number one is figure out who you can trust who has the tea. Like for me, it's like which person is super knowledgeable about the business, the ins and outs, is like knows everyone, is on every meeting, so you can talk to them and be like, you are my map to this business, and how do I understand this web of relationships and what people are interested, why people are this way, and so on. That's usually the first step. So with most clients, I usually will identify that person pretty quickly, or I'll ask, who's this person who's going to know like about the business enough to help me out or point me in the right direction. And that's happened almost with every client. I'm trying to think if there's any clients that it hasn't happened with. No, I was with a pretty big tech company, like 1,000+ person tech company. And the joke was I knew all the information about the company before everyone else at the end of the day, because like in the beginning, that was the first thing I asked. I was like, who can I lean on to get me information? And they were like, oh, this person for this person is great. So I sat down with them and be like, okay, who are, tell me about the people. I want to know about the people. Their business I'll learn over time. Don't get me wrong. But I need to know about the people, who they are, what's going on.
What do they care about? What are they?
Who's important here? Who's not important here? And like pretty quickly, then you have conversations with other people and they'll be like, yeah, like I'm having trouble here. And I'll be like, is it because of whatever name of difficult person? They'll be like, yeah, well, tell me about it. What's going on? And then you start building this rapport and then you can go on to next. Yeah, it's bad. I'm also kind of the town gossip sometimes. So I like literally once, even when I wasn't there, they weren't my client anymore. I had left the company. I would hear news about everything before it even happened. And I'd message people like, how did you know? We just found out. I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, I would just say make yourself available and make yourself interested in hearing about like the important information about how people tick and know the sentiment. I mean, even like my husband's company, I don't work for his company, but I listen to every single piece that he talks about. I know all the relationships between the people. I know like who's important. So when he asked me a question about like, I'm trying to get this done, I'm like, well, did you get this person's buy-in and this person's buy-in? I think that's most critical. And he's like, oh yeah.
But I think that's a really interesting actionable piece that you can do. Anybody can do remotely. Just ask who knows a lot about what's going on, and just reach out to that person and say, hey, could we do virtual cup of coffee for half an hour and just give me the lay of the land. I think that's a really great.
So that's the basic, right? The next thing of that is how do you spend enough time with people who you don't see every day to actually build a connection?
Yes.
And I think sometimes, I mean, I struggle with this because I'm a consultant and like my time is I'm not there to shoot the shit.
Right.
So like I will get into a meeting and if people are like shooting the shit, I'm like, no, we got to talk about business. Here's the agenda.
Right.
But I would say if you're a full-time employee and you really need to get to know the company and everyone in the company, spend the time talking to people, every single person, understand them, like get to know them. It is important to know like that. I mean, this is terrible. I just found out at one of my clients that the person who pays the bills, who cuts the checks to all the vendors, I just found out that her son was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's very, very sad, right? So I want to be gentle with her when it comes to like pushing her to make sure our vendors are paid and I'm also paid as well.
Right.
So it's like, but like I find those things out and it's like, you don't find those things out unless they're willing to tell you or someone who is willing to tell you something that I guess like that you shouldn't be public information. So obviously not naming names, but it's one of those things where that's why like spending the time with people and getting to know them so that you can find these things out, or like, hey, like I'm trying to do XYZ. Why isn't this happening? You can like, know it's because, someone, had an emergency or someone's not feeling well. And, these little things are important.
It's getting to know the people behind the operations, not just sort of
I mean, moods are so important. I remember the chairman of one of my clients, he was like really nice, affable guy, very friendly guy. And at some point, I don't know when it started because I don't see him all the time, but at some point, his mother-in-law, you know, she was very old, she was starting to go, and his mood completely changed. So you had to like find when he was in an okay mood to get anything done.
Right.
So that's the other thing. That's the other thing with consensus. It's so funny how all related this is, right? Like, you also have to know how people are feeling if you want the yes. They have to be in the right headspace. If they're not in the right headspace, you're more likely to get a no, especially if it's a senior person.
Interesting. I heard, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that at Apple in the Jobs era, that people would tell bad news. They would wait till Friday afternoon to tell the bad news, because that's when Steve was in a good mood. And but it's the timing. It's the
right. Timing's important.
That's so interesting. Wow. So it's about people. It's about negotiation. It's about understanding their mood. It's about getting people on relationships, getting people on board with you, finding ways to get to yes, and realizing that when a no doesn't necessarily mean it's not, a no isn't always is not binary. A no is no for this, but let's find out what is yes for that. Very neat. Very neat.
That's a great summary.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, you can always negotiate something without getting to know people. You can always negotiate something, a yes or a no out of a situation, right? Whatever you need. But you have to continue to work with everyone, so it's good to have that relationship. So that's kind of like on the same level as me as negotiation, just because if you're going to be full-time at a company or even like with your clients and so on, you have to get to know the people. If it's like a one and done, like you're calling customer service and you need to negotiate with them, you don't need to get to know the person. Don't ask them about their cat at home. It doesn't matter. I mean, maybe they'll be nicer to you. That happens all the time, but you don't need to go into too much detail. But yeah, there are like little things you could do. The other book to also read is Cialdini's Influence.
Oh, that's a great book.
How you can influence people. Yeah, like so good. Like even the little things, even like saying someone's name, and like, let's just say, for example, the customer service example, saying someone's name multiple times makes them like realize there's a connection there, or think that there's a connection there. You might get more of what you want. It's the same thing in like in the workplace, in something like, oh, that was Abe's idea. Abe hears that, he's like, oh, okay.
And now I know that you have my back, and I have your back. I'm
actually hearing you.
Yeah. I like that.
There are little things you can do. And it's so, the worst thing about all this is that we're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds so manipulative. But I'm just going to say, for me, it's strategy. It's all about strategy. If you want to get something done and your job is to get something done, you have to be strategic about it.
Right.
And yes, it does sound like you're manipulating people to get them to wherever, but like, if it's not manipulating them in a bad way, for the good of the business,
it's also it's getting buy-in, because at the end of the day, you or the organization respects them enough that their opinion matters. Yeah. And it's recognizing the influence that they hold over the whole process, and it's, in a way, it's very respectful. It's very,
that is beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. I also work in PR. So.
Nice.
It's all about that. So cool. So what have we not discussed? What have we missed?
Oh my gosh, we've talked about so many things.
or we get into there.
I think that we kind of talked about remote culture. I think that the thing is, it is going to be harder than ever to build consensus from a remote perspective.
Right.
I think you are going to have to think it through, spend time on it. You are going to have to spend time building relationships that may seem frivolous, but are necessary. And I don't think a lot of people want to do that these days. Like, when you're at home, you can log in and out and whatever. But I think if you find that getting the job done really, really well is important to you, invest your time in that. It will go a long way. And it'll become second nature at some point where you won't even feel like it's work. Getting to know someone is wonderful. I am friends with so many people that I have worked with in the past. I mean, Abe, when did I meet you? In like 20...
I was actually thinking about this. We've been friends since 2013, 2014. It's it's at least, wow.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where, you know, I know people who go and work, and like there are these coworkers and they're friendly with their coworkers, but they like, you know, they know the surface level, but they don't know too much more, and they leave and whatever. But like for me, I think it's just really important to get to know the human side of things, because what are we doing? Going to work and just like doing the work and leaving? Yeah, sure, that's fine. But you spend so much time at work. Why not like, you know, get in touch with the people that are working there? I mean, of course you could work at a place with terrible people and not want to get to know them, so don't stay there. But obviously if you like the people there, invest the time.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good place to end it. Invest in the good people at work.
Invest in the good people at work.
I like it.
Exactly.
I like it. Joanna, thank you very, very much for being on the show. It was really we talked about people, we talked about work, we talked about good books. So it's we talked about float disasters. So really covered a lot of ground.
I know. Oh my gosh.
So
I'm going to be thinking about that for a little bit. I'm going to talk about that with my therapist.
Amazing. You're welcome. So if people want to hire you, want to meet you, where can they reach out?
PrimaryMC.com, like primary, the letter MC.com. My business is Primary Marketing Collective. I call it the Marketing Collective because it's not just me. If you want to come to me, I will, and I can't do what you need me to do. I will connect you with anyone that I know to help you out. So for example, if you come to me and you need help with PR, not my expertise, I would point you to Abe, you know, that kind of thing. So it's like, let me know. That's why it's a collective. And sometimes I also pull in my friends to work with me as well. So, you know, I work with a designer who's like my like design lead, and he doesn't like work for my business. He has his own business, and we just sometimes partner to do projects together. So that's why it's a collective. But Joanna at primarymc.com. Primarymc.com is the website.
Cool. We'll have it in the show notes too. So. All right. Thanks for being the show, and
thank you for having me.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.